With all the fighting on Capitol Hill, it's very easy to ask the question, why are Republicans so opposed to Obamacare in the first place? We'll talk about that for a little bit next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
What you talking about, Willis?
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
You cannot find physical standing here in the land of Lincoln from Carbondale to Elgin that we can collectively continue to tolerate anything we found on the streets of South Chicago and East St. Louis, Missouri.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizen.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for them. Can't clean my act.
You know, with all the fighting that's been going on Capitol Hill and all the fighting that's been going on in the arena of cable news and all the fighting that's been going on in social media, it is very, very easy to forget how we got here and what is political rhetoric versus what is political reality. So let's dive into that because we're sitting here, day 10, I believe it is, of the government shutdown. And first of all, welcome back to Get Right with Lenny McAllister, the podcast. And you know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. We can do that jazz once again, LENNYMCALLISTER for your Twitter feedback. Going to Facebook, very simple, tinyurl.com/Lenny page to be able to comment on the podcast on Facebook. Now, one, I appreciate all your feedback back and forth, and so let's continue the conversation, but I've been getting some feedback from the left coast, California, asking about what the heck is going on with Obamacare in the first place that Republicans are so upset about. And I know that some want to go into this first African-American president. He's a Democrat. Republicans hate Democrats. They hate this black president. That's why they're opposing this. And we've seen instances of racism. We've seen racist remarks. We know that some people have taken this down a path that doesn't need to go down. So I'm not going to sit here as I explain the conservative opposition to Obamacare in its current form. And I always put that asterisk on it, in its current form, because there are certain things that conservatives can agree to when it comes to the law as is, certain aspects of this law. But when we're talking about the law, we have to talk about it in its entirety. And in its entirety, there is obviously conservative opposition to it. So I want to get to that today, but I'm not going to sit there and say that there are not some people, and I'm going to say some. I'm not going to say most. I'm not going to say the majority, and I'm definitely not going to say all. There are some people within the conservative movement that have been opposing this president because they don't like the fact that you have an African-American president. They don't like the fact that this guy's from Chicago. They don't like the fact that this guy is a Democrat. And they probably don't like the direction that the country's moving in regards to diversity. I will give you that. There are some. Now, some could mean 5%. Some could mean 2%. Some could mean 30%. I'm not going to give a percentage to it, because I haven't done a poll, and I'm not going to walk the country or jog the country like Forrest Gump looking for answers. I know life is like a box of chocolates, but that's not my box of chocolates. I'm not doing that. You want to do that and put a number to it, that's on you. I will just concede that there are some that have done that. I've seen it myself. I've seen it. I've heard it firsthand. So I know it exists. I'm just not going to sit there and attribute it to the whole conservative movement. Just not going to do that. So what I'm going to do instead is, now that I've conceded that, I want to engage you in a conversation that goes to why conservatives are opposed to Obamacare in its current form, and just bring up some examples as to why we have the opposition, the viewpoints to this law in its current form that we have. Now, number one, as I'm saying, in its current form, and again, your feedback on Twitter and Facebook are much welcomed. I appreciate the conversation. I love you all out there. There are some things in this law that make sense. You got to get rid of pre-existing conditions. You got to try to make insurance more accessible to more Americans. In a bad economy where people are getting married later, people that are married and educated are having children later, which inherently, for the most part, means that people are leaving home later. They're moving out of their parents' home later. It makes sense for people to be on their parents' insurance longer. I would contend that I would like that to be people that are in college. But I can see why people would do that up through the age of 25 with this economy, with the way that our society is built. People are not getting married at 18 years old anymore. They're not having their second child at 22 anymore, married for 4 years and working at the insurance company or working at the local deli or, some local manager someplace. I get that. The world has changed. America has changed. So reflecting that makes sense. So there are some things that people can agree to within Obamacare in its current form. However, there are some things that we are opposed to. For example, the individual mandate. I don't care if Chief Justice John Roberts said that this is allowable by way of the Constitution if you interpret it as a tax, because Congress has the right to regulate interstate commerce. Therefore, it's a tax. Therefore, it's legal. It's still going down, and this is the conservative perspective. This is definitely my perspective. You're still going down a very dangerous path when you allow the government to tell an individual that you must do something. You must purchase a product if you're going to be a citizen of the United States. Now, I know that people say, well, they make you buy insurance when you buy a home. They make you buy insurance when you drive a car. So what's the difference between those two insurance plans and health insurance and mandating that people have health insurance? The difference is you don't have to own a home in America and you don't have to drive a car in America. But what this law is now saying is that as a condition of citizenship in the United States of America, you must have health insurance. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you are allowed to put these types of conditions on citizenship, these type of requirements on citizenship. There are requirements on what you need to be in order to be eligible to become president of the United States or become a senator or become a member of the House of Representatives. But that's not the same as putting conditions on what you must do in order to be in good standing as a citizen. And if you're not going to be in good standing as a citizen by following this requirement, you are subject to a penalty as a citizen. And that's what this boils down to. So yes, legally, it was allowed because Congress has the right to tax. But if you recall how this all went down in 2012, and this is the conservative argument, and this is how they thought the Supreme Court would rule. If you look at it purely as a mandate from government telling the individual American what to do, this is not constitutional. It's not in the spirit of what America was supposed to be all about when it was created. And it's not what we have upheld over the decades since this nation was founded. So, fine, you want to interpret it as a tax, but from the essence of what America's supposed to be all about, government's not supposed to tell you what you must purchase. Just the same as, you go back to the New York City previous law that was struck down in regards to the soda tax or the soda law where 16 ounces is all you can get at one time. Heck, you can even take it one step further and saying, okay, food providers, you must put your caloric intake on every display or main displays in your restaurant so that people know that a slice of pizza with 4 toppings at a greasy joint is probably fattening if you eat more than one slice. It's going to be fattening if you eat one slice, but if you eat 4 slices, it's probably not good for you or for your arteries or for your fat intake or anything else. I mean, it starts going down that path. So conservatives have always said if government can tell you to buy a product, what else can government tell you to do? Can they tell you not to eat certain things because since they're paying for the health insurance or a portion of your health insurance, they have a right to tell you what to do in order to stay healthy? Conservatives would argue that that's the cigarette tax. That's the sin tax. It's the same argument, just on a much larger scale. So that's one option to Obamacare, the individual mandate. Is it an imposition to liberty? Now, let me say this, and I brought this up yesterday. I caution conservatives to please not say that it's the same imposition or the same inhibitor to liberty that slavery was. It's not the same. It's not even close to the same. It's not the same type of inhibitor that Jim Crow laws were. Not the same. Not even close. I mean, we can continue to do this. You can go this with the sex laws. Sodomy law, the cohabitation law, those are two other instances that I brought up yesterday. It's not the same type of situation. There's a different moral fabric, moral implication involved when you're talking about Obamacare and buying a product in that path versus where you are. I mean, you're talking about a train going down a road with Obamacare. Slavery, that train was there, set up shop, brought people in, and were selling T-shirts in regards to inhibitors on liberty. So let's not make them the same. So I caution conservatives, my fellow conservatives, from saying that. I understand why they're bringing up that analogy, but you better articulate it well, or it just sounds very, very, very bad. Number one. So let's go back. The individual mandate, to me, is problematic for the long term. We want people to have health insurance, but not when government's forcing you to get it. And I don't care. And side note, before I continue to go on. Side note, I don't care if this was Romney Care. Number one, if you know the history of what happened in Massachusetts, this was a Democratic plan that they adopted from the Heritage Foundation that Romney got on board with, not something that Romney created. And I don't care if the Heritage Foundation did craft this plan. If you're asking government to force individuals to buy a product, you're going down a dangerous path. And I don't care who originates that plan. Same thing with the Patriot Act. I know you have to do some things after 9/11. But once you start stepping on certain civil liberties, I have a problem with that. I don't care if you're President Clinton, Bush, Obama. I don't care if you're President Lincoln. Lincoln did a lot of really interesting things during the Civil War to try to save the Union. But if you look at it from a constitutional standpoint, wasn't exactly what one would say was in the spirit of the American dream. So there have been plenty of presidents on both sides of the aisle that have done these types of things. Let's move on with Obamacare and the objections. Number two, anytime you have a stagnant economy and you see employers capping labor hours to avoid this law, or you see evidence of people falling out of the economy because they can't get jobs to sustain themselves, and it is more economically viable to get unemployment insurance or to just sit at home and watch their kids while the other spouse goes and works, that's not a good thing. And we already had that going on before the ACA was passed. So now what you're finding are more and more employers. If you're a small business, they're afraid of hitting 50. They're afraid of hitting 50-plus employees, I should say. Because now they have to provide health care insurance or pay the fine. Now, if it were up to an employer that doesn't have that much money, they have 65 employees, pay a fine, which might be X amount of dollars, versus pay for the insurance, which might end up being 3X for those of you that took some algebra back in the day. Is X greater than 3X? No. Pay the fine. And that was always the argument. So you're basically incenting people to pay this fine, not provide insurance. People are tentative about adding to their roles because they don't want to deal with the headache of this from a small business perspective. And because so many jobs come from small businesses in America, you don't want to put any inhibitions to small business job growth, especially in urban America, especially in disadvantaged America, especially in communities that impact lower socioeconomic classes. That's who's suffering the most in this economy. People in the middle class that can't go on vacation, that can't afford that second car, that can't afford to send their kids to college right now, that's bad. When you're already poor in America and these things happen, it's that much worse. So you don't need anything that's going to lock out the poor. All right, number one, they're going to get health insurance because you're going to expand the Medicaid rolls. We already can't afford it. You already have states going bankrupt. You already have states with credit ratings going down. And job growth stagnant, just not there. Then you put something into place that's going to block that. Yes, conservatives see that as a problem. If people are working, they can afford their own insurance, and they don't need Obamacare to make them do that. So number one, the individual mandate. Number two, the impact on the economy. Let's get to number three. You're talking about conservative opposition. Would love your feedback on Facebook or on Twitter. And I'm taking aside those that say, well, it's because he's a black president. There are some that may oppose that for that reason, but I'm giving you conservative reasons aside from race. I'm admitting that race is involved with some people, and I'm not even putting a percentage on some. I said that earlier. Some may be 5%, some may be 35%. I'm not attributing a percentage on that. You can do that. I don't have a poll, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you conservative reasons. Political, logical, conservative reasons to oppose Obamacare in its current form, asterisk. That very important final phrase, in its current form. So we said the individual mandate. We said the impact on the economy. The third thing that we're seeing now are all the glitches. You're seeing nothing but glitches, computer glitches, online glitches. There were warnings about these glitches. We've already seen self-repeal, and I keep telling you, the Obama administration has been self-repealing this law for quite some time now. All the exceptions granted to Nancy Pelosi's constituents, other key constituencies. The employer mandate has been rolled back for a year. You see the unions jumping from the Obama train concerning Obamacare, and now they're opposing this law. When you see these types of procedural, technical, and political glitches with this expansive law that was passed in a controversial way, in an extremely partisan way, and in a way that was highly misunderstood, when you combine all this together, why wouldn't conservatives at least say delay this just like you delayed everything else? Now, granted, I've said this previously. I'm saying it on the Global Grind website today with my article out there. You make this argument in 2011 after President Obama gave you the Bush tax cut extensions for 2 more years. That's when you fight this fight. You don't wait for the Supreme Court to not strike it down. You do something about it yourself in Congress. Because if you get tripped up, because remember, it wasn't John Roberts that we thought was going to vote to uphold this law. We thought it was going to be Justice Kennedy. So if he does what we expect to have done, it's still a 5-4 decision. And if you haven't done anything in 2011 as a Tea Party group in Congress, as Republicans in Congress, you still were going to probably get a 5-4 decision. So, long story short, that was when the fight should have been done. That's when you can sit there and say, well, Mr. President, how's the progress with rolling this law out coming along? That's when you make can we delay this? We are already hearing rumblings. We're already hearing rumblings that you may delay the employer mandate. You're not going to tell me that they just decided this in 2013. We're already hearing rumblings that there are a larger than expected number of exceptions from non-Republican groups. You're not going to sit there and tell me that these folks on Capitol Hill didn't already hear these things. The fight was in 2011, but with that said, with the procedural, technical, and political glitches that you have, why would you support this law in its current form? Especially the way it was passed, especially the way it's been promoted, especially the way it's been misunderstood by so many, including those in Congress on both sides of the aisle, those arguing against the law and those arguing for the law. So I'm listing them down. Number one, the individual mandate is not in the spirit of what America's supposed to be all about in regards to the relationship between the individual American citizen and that individual's government. That's one. Number two, we're already seeing a negative impact in our economy at a time where we need the economy to grow in a very desperate way. Even if you say, well, the unemployment rate's been coming down, or if you even want to say that, well, we don't know if this has really impacted the economy in a negative way. It hasn't impacted it in a positive way. And we needed jobs to come back in 2009, and here we sit in 2013 with this new reality of a jobless recovery. Wall Street's doing just fine. Main Street is boarded up. More of America is starting to look like Detroit than Detroit is looking like the resurgence of America. And that's a problem. Individual mandate, stagnant economy, Obamacare is having negative impacts in several realms and not a positive impact in other realms. You have all these glitches out there that are not going through the way we thought it would or should, what we've been promised and everything else. That's number three. And number four, I'll get to it very quickly. Again, your feedback on Twitter or on Facebook is much appreciated. Want to hear the debate. Number four is there's inconsistent results in regards to what the premiums have looked like since this law was passed and upheld. You see some premiums going through the roof. You see some coming down. There's this wide range of what the economic impact on health care has been. Now remember, this was supposed to bring costs down. The health care problem is not that we don't have quality, it's that it costs too much. So if now you're forcing people to buy a product in a bad economy where they don't have the money into a system that is screwed up and has all kind of glitches everywhere that people are not understanding from an expert standpoint and from a legislative standpoint, and then the cost may be through the roof, in some instances upwards of 100% more of what it was for that individual before ACA was passed? What path are we leading the American people down with Obamacare? That's the conservative argument. Those four pillars right there. And if the conservative movement can articulate those without bringing up the Fugitive Slave Act, without bringing up that Obama's a socialist, or Saul Alinsky, or Bill Ayers, or any of the other stuff that's come up over the last several years, you focus on the individual mandate. You focused on the impact on the economy. You focused on the glitches. And you focus on the fact that there's this inconsistent set of results in regards to premiums being affordable for Americans. And you say, this is not the ACA. This is just the CA. And I don't even know how much they care. I don't even know if this is a CARE Act. That's where Republicans generally are in their opposition to Obamacare. That's where conservatives generally are in opposition to Obamacare. That's the argument that we need to hear more of. What's your take? I want to hear from you on Facebook. I want to hear from you on Twitter. Did I make the conservative case clearer for you? Again, I always love hearing from you, love talking to you. I will catch up to you on another wonderful Friday. In the meanwhile, thank you very much for joining me here on Get Right with Lenny McAllister. You know I love you. I will talk to you mañana. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.